Well, I sang in the chapel choir. We did mostly chants. About when it was all men, it was 6 or 8 of us. Some of it depended on who was able to get up Sunday morning. We sometimes had to wait for the organist. He was one of the students.
Now, what would they have been out doing the night before?
I don't know. I don't
Reading,
think that's
of
changed
course.
much.
Reading till 3 a.m.
That's right,
Yeah,
they
we
were
had
reading.
long reading sessions late in the night.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider your time at Bard a transformative experience?
Well, life is transition. It sure took me from an adolescent high school situation to some mature choices in terms of career direction, and confirmed in my mind some of the things I wanted to deal with. It didn't necessarily give me the access to those things because, in a way, they didn't exist in that day. My focus was social change, religion and social change, and when I came here, I thought I was going to be a social worker, but I didn't know what social work was. When I found out, I knew it wasn't what I wanted to be. When I came up to the college, I'd had this conversation with Dean Gray and Ron Curry, and my dad had been on some kind of trip. When I came back, he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, yeah, it'd be fine. And so he called up the school, and he wanted to be sure that the college was equipped to prepare me to be an engineer. And I'm saying, no, Dad, I've changed my mind. That's where I was, you know. A lot of kids in high school are kind of in flux. And Dr. Edwards encouraged me to go to seminary. I went to Yale because of its strength in social ethics and in community issues. And took me a while before I really got there in that kind of stuff. But I finally worked in Washington, D.C. for 15 years in a church 10 blocks east of the Capitol at the edge of the second worst police precinct in the city, which is a story in itself. Period of time when we were dealing with the civil rights issues. We were working on the issues such as the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice. The city churches were the critical core in the logistics for managing the large population of people that came in and out of the city within a one-day time. We were determined to have monitors on all the fields where people would be down by the Washington Monument and the Memorial, so that we would have observers for anything that might happen between others that weren't sympathetic, or even the park police or the district police, who were not known to be, at that stage of U.S. history, really sympathetic to the cause of civil rights. And a lot of those logistics were worked out by the Council of Churches, working with Martin Luther King and Jackson and Jose Williams and Andrew Young and all those, Ralph Abernathy. I'm missing a name or two.
Incredible period.
Yeah, we were also there at the time of King's assassination, and dealing with the disorders in the city, the involvement with efforts to project reconstruction of the H Street corridor, which was nearest to our church in the Northeast. very dynamic time. We were also involved in the front edge of the Model Cities program, the anti-poverty program, in trying to style those things in a way that would work. And they work much more effectively than many people are willing to grant. There are social scientists who really haven't grasped what went on in those programs and what the residual benefits of those programs are. They're here, they're
You
with us
ended
still.
up doing your social work, didn't you?
Yeah. That's right.
Well, are there any other things that you want to share with us, of memories of yours of BARD, or reflective experiences?
It's hard to just suddenly
Certainly.
pick out of a 3-year period that was 55 years ago some few specifics.
I just thought if there wasn't something that we had covered, if there was something that you had been thinking about as you drove up to campus.
Well, I
this weekend,
remember a few years ago when the Guardian did a piece on the anniversary of women coming on campus. I got a phone call and I gave some very superficial responses, and almost immediately after hanging up the phone, I thought, good grief, there were people like Irma Brandeis, Mary McCarthy, Claire Leonard, who taught ballet, and she taught ballet to the University of Illinois football players, I think. And she came because some women students would want ballet. They felt they had to have somebody in the athletic department who could manage women's athletics and ballet. I mean, it sounds primitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
but for the day it was progressive. I mean, it was a recognition that if BARD was going to do the arts program, that it had, I mean, it is the first college, I believe, that gave full academic credit to work in studio.
Were there any men in that dance program, or just women?
No, actually, if I recall, Christine Fredericks and Anna Baxter, who is married to Wilson. I think they were both in that program. There may have been other women too, but it was a small program. I mean, it was a small college. Our programs were small.
I have a couple more, if
Right.
if you have the energy. I'm fascinated by the interracial group. Did you start that? Did a group of you get together and discuss the need for, what's the origin of that?
It was simply that, hey, we were in a war for democracy, and we were aware that, I mean, keep in mind it was about then that we had a thing called a court decision that said that black people should be able to get a meal on a diner in a train. And so the trains put up curtain rods on the ceiling of the cars so that they could be segregated. If you went to Washington, if you went south, you got off the train in Washington and you got on another train, and the porters separated you in terms of color by simply standing at the door and designating which staircase you went up. That's where we were in those years. The early WNACP efforts were bearing fruit in terms of some of the legal action. So these were public issues, and we were aware that our college was not very representative, although we were, in a way. I think it's BARD and American University in Washington were the first two schools to drop religious quotas, which hadn't happened too much before. That was comparatively recent history when I was a student at Bard. I mean, it may have been 5 years or 10 years before, but it was not. Other schools still maintain quotas for admission based upon religious faith, even at that time. The racial issue was another issue, and we had some social consciousness here. We had a faculty who had, I don't know what percentage, were here because of you were here because of the war. Mm-hmm. Felix Hirsch, Stefan Hirsch, Adolf Sturmthal, you could name many, and they were part of the strength of the school, and this was a real sense of where we were in history. And I think it came out of that we were involved with the racial things. We did decide we would not affiliate with any organizations, as we would not become a part of the WNACP, nor would we become a part, for example, some of us went to Christian student meetings in different places, but we decided on campus we would not, as a campus organization, a student organization, have organizational affiliations external to the campus. We felt it was something we had to work with within the small community in trying to deal with these issues and focus on them ourselves.
Did the faculty who were here because of the war, as you put it, did they discuss that? Did they discuss why they had left, I'm assuming, Germany, Poland, France, wherever, and ended up here?
I don't think they wore it so much on their cuff. They certainly would talk of it. We all were aware of it. Felix Hirsch, I believe, was the political editor of the Berlin Tageblatt. So I knew that as a student. I still know it. Some of their life history in time got to be known. I didn't know some things about Felix until subsequently I met Roland Bainton at Yale Divinity School. As I left Bard to go there, Felix said, "Be sure to say hello to my friend Roland Bainton." I thought nothing of it. I went to Roland Bainton's office soon after I arrived at Yale and introduced him and said, "Felix Hirsch said to say hello." "Oh, did he ever tell you how we knew each other?" And the story was basically that Elizabeth had been in Europe and went to Portugal to study because of the events in Germany. Felix had been incarcerated a couple of times, and they were separated. They had been engaged in Europe, and they were separated. Roland Bainton had arranged for Mrs. Hirsch to study at Yale, in the graduate school. Felix had studied library science in New York and gone to Trenton, where he later went back. And Elizabeth's roommate at Yale went for an interview in Trenton for a library position. And when she came back, she described the interview. If you ever met Felix Hirsch or seen movies of him, he had a large head, very bald, and he bobbed his head when he talked, and with a very, very Germanic azul. And when the roommate described this, Elizabeth said, "What was his name?" And they were reunited. Well, that's the type story. They didn't wear it on their sleeve, but we did learn some of those things. And the Hirsches, they named their first child Roland after Roland Bainton at Yale Divinity School. I've been trying to get more detail about that. I think it ought to be written up in the college history, I mean, just as one of the incidents of the history of the faculty.
Right.
And what was my other question? How do you feel Bard influenced what you did later in your life, or what do you feel you carried into that from Bard, if anything?
Well, in a strange sort of way, some of the interactions on campus were rather typical of the interactions when you deal with controversial issues, and in a kind of junior way, what happened on some of those issues at Bard, and sort of controversy over sort of minor activities, was a foretelling of the sorts of things that would happen whenever you said you thought that school should be open to all people, or this or that or the other, in terms of the civil rights issues. I think we still have today and it may take another generation to get rid of it, in terms of those who really do not want to accept the full integration of our society. Unfortunately, some of them are in very influential positions today. And it scares me in terms of where we are as a nation, because it's easy to find comfortable words to avoid an issue. And that's what some of this is about. Affirmative action, for example, maybe is outdated. It may need modification, but there's still a need for reinforcement for a number of different populations to have at least an entree to consideration for positions and for placements and that kind of thing. I don't know. Have we had a woman president of the Alumni Association before?
Very good question. I don't actually know the answer to that.
I almost asked this morning whether it was a glass ceiling had been broken.
I'll ask her. She may know.
No,
I think we have had a woman before. I don't
May
think
have.
Judy's
I
the
don't
first,
know.
but we can find out.
No, it's incidental, but these patterns are very subtle. They're not.
Well, I think
Yeah, that was great.
it's been wonderful. It's been really
I'm
informative
sorry,
to all of us.
Oh, no, that was... Thank you very much.
Thank you.